All right, Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles calling for the deportation of Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat nominee for New York City mayor, writing in a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi. The naturalization process depends on good faith disclosure of any affiliation with or support for groups that threaten U.S. national security. If Mr. Mamdani concealed relevant associations, that concealment may constitute a material misrepresentation sufficient to support denaturalization under federal law. Well, joining me now is Jain, a former Obama administration official, and John Thomas, a GOP pollster. Ashwani, I want to start with you. So your take here on the congressman. He wants to send Tom Homan after the guy.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. Let's call this what it is: political racism. Every time a Muslim wins, Republicans reach for the same playbook: question their citizenship and smear them as terrorists. That's not oversight, it's Islamophobia. If they really cared about national security, why are they not calling white politicians terrorists when the DHS and the FBI say the top domestic threat comes from white supremacists, not brown and black immigrants? They did this after 9/11. They did this during the Obama presidency. They did this to justify the Iraq War, and now they're doing it again. Mamdani is an American. He's a lawmaker, and is a progressive who beat the political machine by putting people over profits, and I think that's what they're really afraid of.
John, is this true? Would you consider Congressman Ogle to be a political racist?
No, it couldn't anything further from the truth. I would call Congressman Ogles courageous in the fact that he's asking fair questions, that if this mayoral candidate did violate immigration law, the Department of Justice should take action. You know, I think it's pretty rich, Todd, Democrats like one on this show, all of a sudden campaign when President Trump's running for office that no one is above the law. The law always must be enforced. But in this particular instance, when it might neuter one of their favorite socialist candidates from the left, we can't possibly look into whether there might be a violation of law.
All right. Look, Ashwani, I've got to, and guys, feel free to jump in here. This is not NPR, so we want to have a little bit of fun on TV. But speaking of the racism thing, I got to point out his website. Mamdani's own website actually includes a platform position that would tax some white New York City residents at a higher rate than non-whites. Harmeet Dillon over at the DOJ says that is illegal. So here's the deal. I'm a big fan of Glorilla. We just happen to both be from Memphis, Tennessee. Is it fair that I should be taxed at a higher rate than Glorilla?
Well, let me jump in, I guess.
Go ahead.
If you actually look at the proposal, Mamdani's full proposal, he is calling for a progressive tax shift, not based on race, but based on wealth. And he rightly points out that richer neighborhoods, which benefit from better funded services, should contribute more. And yes, due to decades of redlining and racial injustice, those areas are often predominantly white. And naming that truth is not discrimination, it's equity. And that's how progressive taxation works. Those with more contribute more. It's not radical, it's responsible. And I think correcting that imbalance ensures that the wealthiest among us finally pay their fair share.
Ashwani, he
it's
literally
ludicrous,
said
John.
White people in neighborhoods. Here's how you know it's wrong and racist. Flip the conversation. What if another lawmaker said, we're going to take black neighborhoods and put higher tax? Do you think there might be some outrage from the mainstream liberal media? Of course there would, because it's wrong. Look, he is masquerading democratic socialism as racist policies to penalize one group by something they can't control, the color of their skin. This is totally outrageous. This is why so many New Yorkers are losing their minds and thinking about fleeing the city to places like Florida and Texas and Tennessee, where there's a decency of common sense and perhaps they won't get penalized for the color of their skin.
Yeah, don't be bringing the communist nonsense to Tennessee, fellas. Ashwani, I want to go back to something President Trump said here. He said, calling Mamdani a 100% communist lunatic, not mincing words. But there's this idea here. He wants to have the government get into the grocery store business. Do we really want the government controlling our ho-hos?
We want the government making sure that taxpayers get what they pay for, which is affordable housing, affordable health care, equitable, fully funded schools, and actually get groceries at prices that are affordable. I think this, it's very also interesting that you're talking about racism when you have the president of the United States whose entire immigration platform is targeting black and brown neighborhoods and those with foreign-sounding names, not different from like my own. It's interesting that you're talking about no one's above the law. Okay, fine, then hold a convicted felon who's currently in the White House accountable, who, by the way, pardoned 150 insurrectionists from January 6th.
All right, John, hop in here.
This whataboutism is trying to hide the ball. We know what happens when there are price controls. And when government takes over things like grocery lines, it creates shortages. We've seen this story so many times historically before. And it's just what's fascinating to me, Todd, is that how the Democratic Party nationally doesn't know what to do. They are paralyzed with fear. Do they say what's so obvious to most Americans that this mayoral candidate is disastrous and will cause the further decline of New York City and fall into communist-like food shortages, housing supply shortages, and crime spiking?
Yeah.
Do they call that out, or do they alienate what might be one of their contenders for president next cycle? They're really to catch-22.
It's a conundrum, gentlemen, a conundrum. Guys, Ashwani, John, we got to get you guys back on. Appreciate you coming on NewsMax tonight. Great stuff.
Thank you.